An important goal of the channel is to help you think better. It's very true that the quality of your life will 100% be determined by the quality of your thoughts. In fact, that is the original goal of philosophy, to help one live better. So much of that has gotten lost in the debates and the terminologies, in pitting philosophies against each other like political sides, instead of finding what works for you, really understanding who you are, what you believe, and why, and what to do with that information. And to those ends, I have built something for you. A custom GPT, a personal philosophy builder. I'm very excited about this. I have spent a lot of time. This is so much more than some philosophy quiz you might do in a magazine, or which Disney princess am I based off these 10 BuzzFeed questions. And I'm not going to lie, it's awesome. There's a ton of back-end logic that makes this thing way better than anything I'd been previously exposed to. Maybe someone else has already done this. I don't know. I haven't looked around. But how interactive this is, paired with how simple it is, what you get from it at the end, and how you can integrate it from there for additional use and benefit, I gotta say, I'm excited for you guys to try this. There is a link in the description below, and you can go and find out your own personal philosophy. Before you do that, though, I'm gonna ask that you stay here so I can explain a few things so you can get the most from it. And also just know that I don't see your answers. It's completely private. And that's the other thing. Some of you might have an issue with the AI aspect of this. I view AI as a tool. It can be abused. It can also be used for benefit. If you don't like AI, you don't have to do this. But for how I structured and organized the logic behind the scenes, I needed something like AI for someone like me to ever be able to offer this. So let me tell you the story quickly about how it came about. Then I'll tell you how it is set up. I'll show you some examples from my own going through it of what you can expect, and then why this information is so powerful and how you can use it further. So it came about in a pretty simple fashion. I was at the bar having a whiskey with my dad. I had given him The Myth of Sisyphus, the book, for a Christmas gift. He had just finished reading it, and he was asking me, "Did you get this for me because I'm a nihilist?" I said, "No. And also, I don't think you're a nihilist." And so we talked about terms, and I took him through some thought experiments, because I actually think he's probably kind of like me in this, where he maybe leans towards absurdism, thus the book. But I realized how easy it is to not understand some of these terms, these schools of thought, these philosophies, these principles, or even to self-identify. And my dad likes to try to stay pretty tech savvy, and he's pretty impressed with ChatGPT. So I went home and I tried to give it some information about my dad to ask, well, what do you think his personal philosophy is? Because that's what we had ended up speaking about, is developing a personal philosophy. And I wanted to be able to send him something a little more advanced. And so it started asking me questions about him, and I would answer, and I would say, well, what about this? And it just went from there. And over the last few weeks, and after finding out you can create custom GPTs, I put together what I'm calling the personal philosophy builder. And again, as a caveat, there's going to be some bias because of the structures and logic that I put into it. But I tried to be as fair as possible. I tried to grab philosophies and schools of thought from both ancient and modern time, and from all cultures and places of the world. And you know me, I'm a mixture, hopefully, of organized structure and nuance. And I think you'll see both of those things. So let me show you what this looks like if you click into it. By the way, I have an image here of a tree just to represent what this is, because philosophy is this great source of knowledge and power, but it has all these branches. You can go so many different ways with it. And like a tree, it needs to be nurtured. It needs time and attention. And going through this process, I think, is part of that time and attention that can help water those roots and flourish your personal philosophy. You'll see there's 4 simple prompts. And by the way, the cool thing about this, like all things in ChatGPT, it's very interactive. You don't have to click one of these 4 prompts. You can say anything you want. I have built in, though, that it will try to corral you into starting the process. And so we have the first prompt. I'm ready. Let's do these 50 questions. If you want to understand the full process, you can click that second prompt before you begin, or you can look at some of the order that I've had to put in. So I put in 5 domains and 50 philosophies. Each of the 5 domains houses 10 potential philosophies, and it's going to ask you 10 questions within each domain to arrive at a primary and a runner-up philosophy. It'll make more sense here in a second. Let's just look at these 5 domains. Domain 1 is ontology and metaphysics. You'll see the 10 listed philosophies below that I think represent well these categories of thought. And again, you'll get 10 questions that help determine which of these is your primary and then a backup or secondary. And then the next domain with 10 more questions to arrive at one of these 10 philosophies is ethics and morality. Domain 3 is meaning and purpose. Why are we here? And you'll see the 10 listed for that. Domain 4 is practical life philosophy. It's good to have the ideas, the concepts of those first 3, but how are you implementing? How should we live? You'll see some overlap with these 10 from the last 10. And then the fifth domain, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to include, but I thought, you know what? It's all been so self-focused, and to live well is to interact with others. And so I added a social and political thought domain with 10 philosophies, or I guess even areas of politics underneath. But it's more than just what side of the political aisle are you on? How do you think society should be organized? What are your views on power and justice and fairness? How should we come together? What do we owe each other, if anything? So these are the 5 domains representing the 50 philosophies based off 50 questions that at the end you will arrive at your personal philosophy, your philosophical constellation. There's a lot of feedback and summaries all the way through, again with a final synthesis that gives you a lot of information and some extra special details. I'll show you that here in a minute, but I want to give you an example of a question and the answers so that we can talk about the best way to utilize this. Here's question 1 as an example for domain 1. What do you believe is the fundamental nature of reality? Now, each of these questions are going to be open-ended, but I also provided you 4 potential answers. They're written out for you so you can just choose from them. There are some of you that are going to want to go through this quickly, and I've tried to ensure that each of these potential answers represents the entirety of how it could be answered, but I may fail, and that's why there's also an option E. An open response, write your own. And I've put into the logic on the back end, and I'm not going to keep trying to explain all the things I've done to direct how this is categorized and utilized, but the open answer is important. And the more that you do an open answer, by the way, the more detailed your final synthesis can be. You don't have to. It's fine just to go with one of the pre-selected choices. But I want you to feel no restrictions here. If you don't know, say I don't know. If you're leaning towards one, but considering another, say, yeah, I think A, but maybe a little bit of D. You could just simply say A and D. In fact, if you do that, here's what it says back. Interesting combination. You see reality as fundamentally physical, yet also unified beyond traditional distinctions. Let's keep exploring. And then it moves you on to question 2. But on the back end, it is weighting answers A and D with its internal logic of how it's determining which primary and runner-up philosophy best apply to you. And if you feel like you need to say more, then say more. My answer is essentially A and D, but I wrote out more. I said A and D. I'm convinced that there's nothing else, that everything is physical and natural, but I'm open to that being wrong. I also understand that there are concepts, and I gave you the example of like love, that can feel more real than reality itself, though I also understand those concepts are probably based off nothing more than synaptic firings, brain chemistry, but to me that doesn't devalue them at all. But I do recognize the caveat there. I said most of that, and I saw that in how some of my answers came out later, or my summaries. So be as brief or as detailed as you want. Use the letters, use a combination of the letters, or just talk. You can't go wrong here. Find out who you are. And again, not that this is perfect and will tell you exactly how you are, but see where it goes. Be authentic. Okay, next I'm going to give you an example of a domain summary. So after you finish the 10 questions per domain, and again 5 domains, you'll get a summary with a few things. Here's mine as an example. My primary alignment is materialist. Reality is physical. Everything reduces to material interactions and natural laws. It tells me how it thinks I see the universe. You can read this on your own if you're curious. It then gives a runner-up, skeptic, and it defines that. Then it goes down to a key beliefs revealed. I'll read just a few of these, but you can go on. Reality is physical. There's no supernatural forces that are necessary. Consciousness is an emergent property of the brain, but not fully reducible to simple laws. Free will is an illusion. Everything is determined by prior causes. These are the key beliefs revealed about me based off my answering of the 10 questions, and there's more there. Then it's going to give you an interpretation. I'm a rational yet open mind. And I'll read this one to you so you can get a feeling for it. Your worldview is deeply naturalistic and skeptical. You believe that reality is purely physical and that all phenomena, including consciousness and identity, emerge from material interactions. However, you balance this with a recognition of epistemic humility, the idea that our understanding is always limited by perception and cognition. You have a pragmatic and scientific approach, favoring evidence-based reasoning over speculation, while you don't reject complex phenomena like love or meaning. See how it ties it back in? The more you give it, the more you will get. You see them as arising from physical and social processes rather than as a fundamental feature of reality. Then it gives a little midway reflection, what this says about you, and it moves you on to the next domain. So you get a summary like that for each of the 5 domains. Then, once you complete all 5 domains, you'll get your final synthesis. Here's mine for any of you that are interested. We'll go through it really quick. For metaphysics, I'm a materialistic with that skeptic undertone. For ethics, I'm a moral relativist with consequentialism undertones. For meaning and purpose, I'm an existentialist, which makes sense sense. I'm all about creating your own meaning and purpose. But also the runner-up was humanist. That domain summary was really interesting on how those two pair well for me. Again, this was all beyond fascinating, even to me, who's done so much work to understand these things for myself already. For practical life, again, existentialist. So I told you there's some overlap sometimes, and that makes sense to me. But here, when it comes to how I actually handle day to day, the pressures, the hope, the fears, the losses, the victories, I'm also pretty stoic. And then for social and political, it put me as liberal. And some of you are going to be like, yeah, see, all atheists are just liberal. Very different than leftists. And I think if you saw my liberal mixed with my communitarian and you saw the nuance spelled out in the domain summary, it would either impress all of you or offend all of you, because it is this pretty strange concoction. I hate political labels. So again, that's why I didn't want to necessarily include this. But I think the way that I've set up the questions, the answers, the logic, etc., you get a really good grounded nuance of your position. Then after that, it gives you some more goodies. You get an interpretive reflection. So this is a mixture from all five. The responsible creator. Your worldview is grounded, free thinking, and people-centered. You don't seek truth in absolutes. You forge it through action, reason, and reflection. You understand that meaning, justice, and selfhood are all shaped through interaction between mind and matter, self and society, choice and responsibility. You might describe your overarching stance as, and then I've asked it to, best that it can, combine your 5 personal philosophies into one philosophical name. You can ask it for more if you don't like what you get, but I really like the one I got. My personal philosophy is thus existential communal rationalism. I think that's pretty apt and pretty cool. It then also suggested some poetic variants of the compass within, radical responsibility, or the framework of freedom. What I would ask is this. If you click the link and you complete all 50 questions and you get to this final synthesis, in the comments, would you put what it gave you? I'd be so curious to hear what everyone is getting. This wouldn't be for me if it didn't include recommended reading, so I asked it to give some philosophical works as well as some fiction reads, classic lit at least. And I swear I didn't plan this, this is just what came up, that my first recommendation is The Myth of Sisyphus by Camus. And it tells you a little bit about why it might have chosen this for you. So for that one, it says, living without illusion, choosing meaning anyway, a core existentialist view. Then it recommended Justice by Michael Sandel, moral philosophy meets political realism in the modern world. Makes sense why it suggested that for me. Then Liberalism and its Discontents, Ethics Without Absolutes by Peter Singer. I know and love this book, and it's saying it's for relativism and context in moral life. And then The Left Hand of Darkness. Now you could ask it for more. You could say, I only want book recommendations that are fiction or nonfiction and only for this domain or this personal philosophy. Once you have this, you can use it for so much different kinds of integration. In fact, the next part that I did is I created activation questions. These I actually left up to ChatGPT so that they would be based off of what you get for your personal philosophy. So going back to me as the example, we've identified that for metaphysics, I'm a materialist. 2 things it thinks maybe I should consider are, what rituals or routines help you stay grounded in reality, and how do you respond when others invoke the mystical? At the end, you can actually download a PDF and there will be journal room to answer these questions, or you can just put this back into ChatGPT and say, hey, based off my 5, how would you answer this? Or you can forget these questions and do your own. Say, okay, if it is true that this is my personal philosophy, I have this person in my life who is like this, how can I best interact with them? What things should I be aware of? Hey, if this is my personal philosophy, what are my blind spots? You can just take this and go. So again, the very last thing that you can do is you can download your profile, get a PDF or an Excel of everything. Your 5 domain breakdowns, your final synthesis, your reading list, your activation prompts, and again, some reflection space. It's all nice and neat in a single sheet. So I hope that you enjoy this. I hope that you will give it a shot. It served me well. And again, I am someone who has done so much reading and work on this already. For those of you that haven't committed to reading 500 philosophy books or haven't been questioning these things almost daily for the last 5 years of your life, it might be a really quick catalyst to some deeper learning for yourself and your situation, your belief, etc. Ideally, this tool is for anybody, no matter what level of interest you have in this, no matter what personal belief or religion you are already a part of. And again, I'm totally open to feedback. I can still update this. So if you're like, hey, I went through it and I noticed this, let me know. I went through, like 15 to 20 iterations of full testing, like answering all 50 and seeing it do this or do that differently. And then I'd have to go back and say, hey, change your logic to this and that. An example, just really quick so you can understand, is sometimes it was giving the multiple choice answers in in the same order. So I noticed A is always going to align more with this kind of philosophy. Well, I didn't want that to influence your decision if you notice that pattern. Sometimes it would give you feedback after you'd answer a question, say, hey, that aligns with this philosophy. It still does that to a degree, but not nearly as strong. Again, I'm wanting to limit the influences. How you get the domain summary, when it prompts you to continue, all of these things I actually had to input. So if you see something A, broken, or B, that could actually be better or would be more useful, give me that feedback and we can help continue to elevate this together. Thank you so much for being here. Remember to comment your personal philosophy at the end. I'll see you Sunday with a patron pick video. And until then, keep thinking. I wanted to personally thank my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast, Alexander, Ann, Boris, GVI, Jimmy, Joe, Kiboga, Matthew, Perry, and Sean; my Humanist Heroes, Craig, James, Jared, Christy, and Matthew; my Atheist Advocates, Caleb, David, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Julie, Malcolm, Paul, Sparky, and Thomas; as well as all of my Secular Scholar patrons. If you believe in the mission of this channel or you just enjoy its content, please consider joining these fine people.